Okay, so now that I have this class, that is going to be the class to which the JSON is converted, I would like to create the UI for my Windows application in which all the venues are going to be shown. So what I want to do is enlist on the user interface this list of venues. So to do that, the first thing that I'm going to do is come to my project, right-click it, and I'm going to add a new folder in which I'm going to get user controls. So inside of this folder, you guessed it, I am going to create a user control. So I'm going to right-click it and add a new item. So I'm going to create a user control and I'm going to name this user control venues or venue control. My user control is going to look something like this. I have a text block for the name of the venue, a text block for the country, the state, and the city, and finally a text block for the address. So each of these text blocks already have a name, and what I'd like to do is go to the CS file of my user control and create a property of type venue. Remember that the venue is on the class's namespace on the Foursquare venue file. And once I get this venue, or once the venue is set, I will set each of the labels or the text boxes, the text blocks, to have a particular value. So I will get the text property of the label name or the text block where I will write the name. And remember that the venue has precisely a name. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other properties, the other text blocks. And to get the country, I actually have to access the location. And in the location, I have the country property. And the same goes for the state property. So through the venue, I get the location and the state. And the same goes to the other property. So I should have something like this. The next thing that I want to do is go to the main page and create a list where a list of these user controls are going to be created. Rather, they are going to be shown in that list that I will create on the main page. So here in the main page, I have created a grid view. I have given it a name and a certain margin. And in this grid view, I would like to add user controls. And those user controls are going to represent the venues that I will get from the API, the Foursquare API. So by now, the interface is ready. All there's left to do is get those venues from the Foursquare API. So for us to be able to work with HTTP requests, what I want to do is come to the references section in my project, right-click it, and click on Manage the NuGet packages. We need a package that is going to allow us to use HTTP requests. So I am going to search for the HTTP request libraries from Microsoft. And as you can see, here is the Microsoft HTTP client libraries. So I will select it and I will install it. Once the libraries have been installed, I should come back to the main page.xaml.cs, and in here I would like to make the request as soon as I get navigated to the page. So in here I will override the onNavigated to method, and I will actually start making the request to get all those venues from the Foursquare API. So what I want to do is use an HTTP client, which is on the system.net HTTP namespace that has been added to my project on the references section. And go ahead and make the request. Now, before I make the request, I do need the URL to where I am going to make the request to. So I have here the URL of the Foursquare API. And remember that I am searching, I'm using the search endpoint. And I pass the client ID and the client secret and the version and the longitude and latitude. Now, I don't want this to be static. What I want to do is get the latitude and longitude of where the user is. So I will replace this with those elements so I can later format this string. And what I do want to do is get the current location of the user. And I can do that through the geolocator class. And I need to add a namespace. And to get the location, I also want a geoposition class, a geoposition object. And I'm going to get the position through the locator with the geoposition async method. Now, because this is an async method, it needs an await operator. And I need to change this to be an async method, like this. So now the position object already has the position of the current application or the current device. And now I can set the URL to be a format of URL. And I want to get two parameters which are going to be the latitude and the longitude. So I can access them through the position object, coordinate. And even though I have the latitude and longitude objects or properties right here, I want to access the point property, which has a better position or location accuracy. And in the point property, there's a position property. And in the position property, I do have the latitude and the longitude. So I will do it first for the latitude and then for the longitude, like this. And by now, the URL should have the correct URL with the correct latitude and longitude. Now, of course, because I'm accessing the geolocation, I do want to get my manifest open. And I have to let the operating system know that this app is going to try and access the location. So in the app manifest, I will go to the capability section and go to the location section and save the changes. So once I have the URL, I will try and catch any exception that occurs during the using of the HTTP client. And I will want to get the request from the API of Foursquare. Now, before I start doing this, I would like to come and make some changes to the venue control. And what I want to do is evaluate if these values in here are null. So I should have something like this, because I don't want my code to just break if any of these values is null. And now we'll come back to the main page. So through the client, what I want to do is first of all get the stream that is returned when I make a request to that particular URL. So to do that, I will create a stream, and that stream I want to get through the client, and the client has a getStreamAsync method. Now what this gets is the URL to which it's going to make the request, and it returns a stream that I'm going to get in this variable in here. Now, once I have the stream, I need the serializer or the deserializer that is going to convert the JSON to the C# code. And I can do that through the data contact JSON serializer class. You may need to add a using sentence, and by this time you may start to see things a little bit clearer. As you may remember, we have set all these classes to be data contracts. And right now we are using a data contract JSON serializer. This means that this class is going to deserialize a certain JSON to the data contract that it appears or that it finds in this file. And we are going to do it right now. So I will create this object. And this class in its constructor needs to know the type that it's going to be serializing or deserializing to. So the type that I want to deserialize to is the root object, because as you may remember, the root object is the first class that should be deserialized because it contains everything else. So the deserializer will first deserialize to this data contract, and then to this data contract, which is the response, and then to the venue, and so on and so forth. So now that I have this serializer or deserializer, I actually want to deserialize a certain JSON. And I want to get that JSON in a root object, so I will create an object which is going to be holding the response. And I want to, through the serializer, read the particular object, which is the stream. So the stream has all the JSON, and I want to read that JSON and transform it to whatever the serializer is going to transform it to. In this case, a root object. Now the read object, of course, returns an object, so I will parse this to be a root object. Perfect. So now my response root object has everything I need. The next thing that I want to do is clear the grid venues so I don't get repeated venues in the grid view. And then I want to evaluate if I actually got some venues. So if response.response.venues is not null, in this case it means I did get some venues, then I want to iterate through these venues. So for each venue, variable, for each venue that I find or that there is on the venues property, I want to create a user control. So I want to create a new venue control. And remember that the venue control has a venue property, and I want to set it to venue. And finally, I want to add this control to the grid view. Like this. So now when I run this application, the first thing that it asks is for our allowance to access the location. And once we have allowed the location to be accessed, it should get the location and it makes the request to the venue, to the Foursquare API. And as you can see, I have now all of the venues that it has retrieved from the Foursquare API. Perfect. So our application is done. We have already used a Foursquare API. We got the location of the current device and we made the request. So the Foursquare API returns some venues that are nearby, and we added those venues as user controls to a grid view. Perfect.